The Old Code. Chapter 1. Legacy Lines. The air in the server room was always cooler than the rest of the building. A hum of fans and power whispered constantly like a digital heartbeat. Steve Colburn stood among the racks of blinking machines, one hand resting on a tower he'd installed himself over 15 years ago. He was 62 now, with salt and pepper hair, a worn denim shirt, and eyes that had seen the rise and fall of both hardware and humans. He'd been with Halverson Solutions for 20 years, back when the company was just a couple of guys in a borrowed office over a bakery. They couldn't afford a coffee machine then, so Steve brought his own, a beat-up Mr. Coffee that still sat on his desk today. Back then, everything was simple. You wrote code, solved problems. You built something that worked and stood behind it. Loyalty meant something. Now it was all slideshows, synergy meetings, and monthly vision reboots. Steve didn't complain. He adapted like old machines often do. Quietly, efficiently, without asking for credit. But something had shifted in the last 2 years. And it had a name. Brant Wexler. Chapter 2. The Inheritance Virus. Brant joined Halverson Solutions as Director of Strategic Growth, a title so vague it meant everything and nothing. He was tall, young, probably early 30s, with a jawline that looked AI-generated, and a suit collection worth more than Steve's truck. He shook hands too hard and smiled too wide. Worse, he was married to the CEO's daughter. That alone made him untouchable. In meetings, Brant talked more than anyone else. Modernize, synergize, next-gen monetization. The man treated buzzwords like gospel. He launched internal dashboards that no one used, rebranded the company's website 5 times in a year, and outsourced entire departments overseas without so much as a notice. Steve tried to stay out of it, till Brant started poking around in the back-end systems. "Hey, Steve," he said one afternoon, leaning over the cubicle wall with his sleeves rolled up like a man playing executive in a movie. "Quick question. Do we have a sandbox environment where I can test some financial modeling scripts?" Steve blinked. "That's accounting, or maybe ops. Why would you? It's just exploring efficiencies. Thought I'd poke around." That's when the first red flag went up. Steve gave him a limited guest login, read-only access. Brant never used it. Instead, he got admin-level permissions within days, granted quietly, probably by leaning on someone in HR or finance. Steve knew he was being bypassed, so he started watching. Chapter 3. Ghost Protocols. Late one Friday night, Steve sat alone in his office. The only sound was the gentle clack of his keyboard and the server fan spinning beside him. Using a diagnostic script he'd written years ago, nicknamed Ghost Protocol, he began crawling the company's infrastructure. At first, everything looked normal until he saw Sandpiper. It wasn't a code name anyone had approved. It didn't belong to any project he knew of. Buried deep within the cloud stack, Sandpiper was disguised as a legacy log archive. But Steve saw the access timestamps, and they were active. Multiple times a day, he cracked it open. Encrypted folders. Shadow accounting ledgers. Outbound financial records routed through anonymized IPs, vendor invoices for services that didn't exist. Funds disappearing slowly, carefully, into offshore accounts linked to dummy corporations. Brant was embezzling millions. Steve stared at the screen for a long time. The sense of betrayal burned. This wasn't some script kiddie trying to skim change. This was deliberate, methodical corruption. Worse, Brant was using code Steve had written years ago to do it. It was like watching your own child rob a bank with the tools you've taught them to build. Steve copied everything. Backed it up on encrypted USB drives. Saved hard copies in a safety deposit box. Then he drafted a report for the CEO. He planned to submit it Monday. He never got the chance. Chapter 4. The Firing Line. Friday afternoon, HR called Steve into a meeting. The office was uncomfortably bright. Michelle from HR gave him a sad smile. Brant sat at the far end of the table, sipping a lavender seltzer. "Steve," Brant said smoothly, "we've been doing a little internal review of staffing. You've been with the company a long time, and frankly, we feel it's time to inject some new energy." Steve didn't blink. "We're restructuring," Brant continued, "trying to align with younger demographics. Innovation metrics. Gen Z integration. All that. You get it. You're firing me," Steve said plainly. "It's not firing," Michelle said quickly. It's a soft retirement. We're offering a generous severance. You can even stay on part-time as a consultant for a few months. The folder in front of him was already prepared. Severance, NDA, and a gag order. Steve looked up, right into Brant's eyes. And that's when he knew. Brant knew Steve had found everything. This wasn't corporate downsizing. This was a hit job. Steve collected the folder without a word, stood up, and left. But as he passed the door, he glanced back and said, "You should have just unplugged me, because I'm not gone yet." What? Brant laughed. He wouldn't be laughing for long. Chapter 5. A War in Silence. Steve drove to northern Michigan that weekend. A cabin by Lake Huron that he'd bought with overtime pay years ago. No Wi-Fi, no cell signal, just trees and water and solitude. But Steve brought something with him. 3 encrypted USB drives, a solar-powered rig, and a laptop loaded with a hybrid Linux OS of his own design. For the next 3 weeks, Steve disappeared from the world and wrote code. Not destructive code. Not malware. Justice. He refined Ghost Protocol into something bigger. A digital watchdog system that would track every transaction Brant ever made. Every message sent. Every falsified invoice. He set up offshore data mirrors, anonymous backups, and time disclosures. He even reconfigured Halverson's legacy systems to ping him once every 24 hours from an old admin port that no one remembered but him. He created a digital noose, and when it was ready, he pulled. Chapter 6. Public Execution. On a Tuesday morning, the Halverson Solutions homepage redirected visitors to a black screen with a single line of white text. The code remembers what you forget. It was signed simply, Admin 001. Before it could be shut down, thousands of emails were leaked. Vendor fraud, insider communications, altered tax filings, offshore wire transfers with forged approvals. Even a voice recording of Brant mocking the CEO, his father-in-law, during a board meeting, calling him a fossil too scared to die. Then came the real blow. A 74-page dossier, complete with annotated transactions, falsified records, hidden server logs, and timestamps. Copies were sent to the IRS, the SEC, 3 major news outlets, the FBI's Cybercrimes Division. Brant's arrest happened in the garage of Halverson HQ, live-streamed, handcuffed, screaming that he was framed. It didn't matter. The code spoke louder than he ever could. Chapter 7. Echoes and Endings. It took months to unravel the mess. The CEO resigned in shame. Brant was denied bail and charged with 12 counts of wire fraud, corporate theft, and conspiracy. He faced up to 40 years in federal prison. And Steve declined interviews, declined book deals. He just sat in his cabin, tending to the garden he never had time for before. Sometimes he would walk down to the lake and skip stones. Other times he would sit with Susan from accounting, one of the only people who had quietly supported him through it all. "You could have brought the whole company down," she said one evening. "I didn't want to destroy it," Steve replied. "Just clean out the infection." A final message appeared on his laptop one morning. System stability, 100%. Security restored. Admin, retired.
Ow.
Steve smiled and closed the lid. Epilogue. The Shadow Engineer. Months later, whispers began circulating in corporate tech circles. A mysterious figure who helped whistleblowers, who exposed corrupt CFOs and shady investors, who left no name, only server logs signed Admin 001. Companies started calling him a myth, a ghost in the machine. Steve was no ghost. He was just a man who built good systems and refused to let anyone break them. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and ring the bell to be notified of future videos. Thanks for watching.